Thank you so much, Leah, for joining us today. You're sitting across from me holding your little 3-week-old baby boy, baby Braun, joining us from just outside of Calgary, Alberta. And just wanted to say thank you for, making the time in the middle of clearly the early stages of mom life to share your birth story.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki. It's such a pleasure. You were very significant and instrumental in both my labors. And I passed it along to lots of friends, and so I really appreciate you having me here today.
Oh,
And later on.
hi, cutie. So this is your second baby, and you had your babies pretty close together. And one couple things that stood out for me when I was reading through your story through the form when we were selecting a bunch of different interviews was that number one, you had to have a home birth to hospital transfer, which was unexpected, and that's come. I feel that because I had the same thing. Also, your son was born on Mother's Day, and mine was too. So I was like, we've got some sort of disconnection happening. And you
Yeah.
also mentioned a bunch of really stressful things that happened after your first baby. And this was an unplanned sort of early second pregnancy that you weren't feeling completely physically or mentally ready for. So there's a lot that you had to go through to even sort of process being pregnant again so quickly the second time, right?
Totally. Yes. It was very different pregnancies between, kind of preparing ourselves. I was also told I was going to have a really hard time getting pregnant my whole life. So we actually planned trying for like a year, and we got very, very fortunate, but then I missed my mat leave by 16 days at my new job because it happened so fast with the first one. Um, and then this one, yeah, we had a 6 months in between, and in between that was pretty heavy 6 months. I grew up in a really small town. My mom had to do a move off our acreage after 35 years, actually 34 years. And then I ended up at 4 months postpartum, just by fluke. They don't know if it was postpartum. I got COVID. We traveled from Calgary to Victoria, BC for a holiday. Felt great. I was hiking, it was a really wonderful weekend. And on the way getting off the plane, I kind of just felt like my pubic bone had been just hit or bruised or kicked. And by the time I got off the plane to my luggage, I could barely walk. The next morning, basically just ramped up. That whole next 3 weeks, I couldn't walk, couldn't move, couldn't even lift myself up out of bed or move myself a centimeter. People had to pass my baby to me. She had a metabolic condition too, so she had to eat every 3.5 hours, or she could risk going into a coma and or having a seizure. So it was really stressful. I ended up after about a month, 25 plus doctors in throughout North America. They were all consulting. Every time I went to emergency, they'd give me like an essay of, they'd consulted all these experts. No one could figure out what was going on, and they'd kind of figured it was going to be postpartum pelvic blood clots that they couldn't get to, and they couldn't do proper MRIs or CAT scans because of I was breastfeeding. And there was just a backlog at the time. So after about a month, they found out it was actually this really weird infection that got into my bone somehow. And there was this little track that was at my pubic bone that they figure now was so small, but that's how they think the infection got into my tendons and my whole pelvic floor area. So the first presentation and first diagnosis was actually hip adductor tendonitis because it was presenting like a muscle thing. But in that whole month, I was in the hospital for a week of it. They had no idea it was infection. Nothing was showing up on blood panels. Like they were doing all the tests. And just one doctor by fluke put me on an antibiotic because she thought maybe it was actually an OB, maybe it was flesh-eating disease. Thank God it wasn't because it was down there. But it took a lot of doctors, and then the MRI, of course, they're trying to fit me in, and they're going to be 45 minutes. And I get into the MRI, and they're like, "Oh my God, has anyone talked to you about a case study?" Like, it's very mentally, like they'd never seen anything like that. That MRI, quickly they were scanning my whole heart, my whole body. I was in there for 2 hours. Like they'd never seen anything like it either. So this infection. When I got out, I just was on an IV line, a PICC line with a fanny pack for 6 weeks postpartum.
Oh my God.
6 weeks. And yeah, basically through that whole process, my family doctor called me and was like, "You probably wouldn't have survived anywhere else." Like it was pretty significant. You couldn't touch me without me bursting into tears. Like it was awful. But literally got the PICC line out on August 3rd, and my first day of my last period was August 4th. So we were just so thrilled to just enjoy the summer. And it was quite heavy. Like when we found out, actually the day we found out he was coming as well, that we were pregnant, we got a new house. So we're lucky, we had some great news. And then we also found out one of my siblings tried to commit suicide that night.
Yes.
So it was like bam, 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 bam. And in the meantime, the same week I found out two of my best friends were also pregnant. We also had our babies within 10 days. And there was some more heavy news. Our Opa was diagnosed with cancer and having some relapse at the time, and a sibling had two friends had a miscarriage around 16 weeks, the same time. So this pregnancy had a lot of a mental, like that was kind of a quick recap, but there was a lot of mental things I was working through mentally and trying to just process. And so when it came to, do we want this baby, or are we ready for this baby? Can I physically have this baby? I've had this huge trauma on top of postpartum to that area. So your videos, and we can go, and I'm sure you have lots more questions, but there's been a lot of things that have been very instrumental to getting me through this. And two of the things I was most fearful of was one, how my body would handle delivery of this second baby, and two, would I mentally be ready for it? And then I really wanted that home birth again, just to because for me that was something that mentally I really wanted to help me get through this. I thought that I would be in a safer space, I would feel better about it, I would be more able to embrace everything. And so I was really hanging on to that as well for getting me through and kind of full cycle.
Was your first was a home birth?
My first was a kind of planned hospital, but turned home, which I was really grateful for. She came very fast. So they were also worried because I'm further from the hospital now. I was 5 minutes from the hospital and we didn't make it last time. And this time I'm half hour from the hospital. So they were very worried that I would be delivering on the road, which I definitely at times I was when we were making that commute. So
no kidding. Okay. All right. So we need some details. So just to recap, it sounds like, you had very significant, incidences of trauma from within your family. You were moving, which is very stressful in and of itself. You also had a daughter with a metabolic condition, that stress of, like you mentioned, going over, that could be a whole conversation in and of itself of, like, if she didn't have her blood sugar regulated, mentioned her going into a coma. Like, I'm just pulling things out and I'm just like, oh my God, time out. Like, what? Like, and then you had to be on a PICC line because of a crazy rare blood infection that went into your bones and it was debilitating pain. And then you got pregnant and you weren't expecting it and you just wanted to enjoy your summer. And so it's like, that's a lot, Leah, and a lot of resilience required to sort of navigate all of that. And so, and I think this is obviously so relevant. And I share this because we know that, for example, and this always, sort of surprises people, but one of the biggest predictors of pelvic pain in subsequent pregnancies is prior trauma. So like, you were going into this current pregnancy that you just had, this little baby boy you're holding, you went into this pregnancy already such a deficit emotionally and physically. And so and I'm sure you're not the only one, like, this has happened to women in the past, right? And it will continue to happen. So how do you sort of navigate all of that? That's a big question, I know.
That is a big question. And it's so true, this pregnancy, I feel like I kind of told myself there are phantom pains. It's like, this must be like, I'm just holding so much tension, because there was a lot of like muscle spasms. The pregnancy became, that's why I kind of thought it was a boy. I was like, it's either the pregnancies are different or I'm just holding so much tension that I'm creating this pain everywhere. And I think it's just one of those things that, like, mentally you have to be so grateful for what you have. And I think that, like when you talk about like this unplanned pregnancy, which, it was, and, it was a very hard conversation for us to have, like, it's another 25% chance of the same metabolic condition, which he turns out to also have. And we found that out because my daughter actually was admitted twice the week that he was born. So he was in the hospital when my husband
Mm.
found out. But it's just one of those things. We're so grateful. We do have a new property, and we're really, we have a great life, and I have a great family, and our daughter is wonderful. And it's just kind of hanging on to those things. My sibling did survive, and he's doing way better. And there's just a lot of things that you can be grateful for, and hanging on to those things, like, I think they make you stronger, and you just
Mhm.
really dig in and appreciate the things that you do have when these kind of events happen to you. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
feel like sometimes they just pile on when you're in a headspace where you're managing them, um, instead of just kind of being sporadic, those ebbs and flows of life that we're all going to go through at some point. So, and then finding resources that help lift you up, right? So, whatever those are. And for me, I had an amazing doula, and my pelvic floor physio recommended you in my first pregnancy. And it honestly, it makes a huge difference reaching out, knowing those stories. You talk about kind of this network. I'm not the first woman who's ever gone through trauma before a pregnancy. There's people who delivered in wars. And
Mhm.
my midwives told me a great story, because I was terrified about how I was going to physically handle this. And people in a coma can have a baby. Your body knows what to do. And I think, regardless of your situation going into a labor, everyone's fearful in some way, whether you've done this 0 times, 10 times. Uh, every labor is different. You can't predict what's going to happen. You may end up with a C-section, an epidural unplanned, a home delivery, a roadside delivery. But ultimately, like, your body's meant to do this. And I think digging in, working into breath work that we've learned through your courses, and movement, and just advocating for yourself, and knowing that you'll get through this. You have a team.
Mhm.
Hopefully you've selected a great team and support to help you. But um, that's what really helped get me through it. So thank you.
Powerful. That's powerful. I would love if you're comfortable sharing a little bit more about what actually happened in your second birth when you had to transfer from your home to the hospital 30 minutes away.
Yeah. So this little guy decided not to move. Everything, and all the things that happened, my birth and the delivery were the best. And I'm so fortunate. Like, he just, despite having to move locations, everything did go really well. So we actually woke up on Mother's Day planning to take my own mom out for brunch. And I talked to our friends and family, and literally by like not 10 in the morning, and everyone's going like, Mother's Day, baby. And I'm going, absolutely not. I'm feeling really great. Like, I'd love to get this guy out of me. But yeah, it had no inkling that it was going to happen that day. And so I'd actually talked about a planned sweep with my midwives. I was 10 and 4, so 4 days overdue. And before, when I did the sweep with my daughter, she was 10 days late. It took a few days still to
Mm. Mhm.
happen. So we kind of knew that, because she came in 3 hours and 5 minutes, that this chance of him coming in very fast were also pretty likely. And so, we also knew it was very likely I would end up at home again. So I was really banking on that, and really like, yes, I think there's a good chance, because one of my midwives didn't even want me to move. She's like, I don't want you on the road,
Mhm.
on the highway delivering. And so, yeah, I called for a sweep at 10, and then I kind of got these mild little cramps, and I've been having, because of my pelvic infection, these really bad, like almost like you get in your foot, but it was happening in my hips, and they were totally completely long.
Mm.
And so I was assuming it was just remnants of that, because I was getting very, very small cramps. Because on that phone, my midwife said, have you had any, asking me the questions before sweep, have you had any movements in the last 2 hours? And I'm going, no. Like, shoot, I haven't had any movements as far as I can remember, till the last night before that. And normally he was really
Mhm.
fiery, ninja kicking me all night. So it kind of got me a little bit worried, because I'm going, no, I haven't had any in like 12
Mhm.
hours or
Mhm.
more that I can think of. So I'm paying really a lot of attention to
Yeah.
anything that's going on. And I noticed these very mild kind of cramps, but they were almost like muscle spasms, but they were happening every 4 minutes. And so I called her half hour later and went, maybe things are happening on their own. And he was here 4 hours later. So in those next 2.5 hours, I actually went 2.5 hours, because I was really, really hoping for movements, but we had no movements. And so luckily my partner, I'm still thinking this is fake labor or false labor, like it
Mhm.
wasn't really quite real. And then by noon, things kind of were starting to escalate, and we basically left for the hospital at 2.5 hours because he didn't move.
Mhm.
And so I kind of just at that point, very disappointed. But I kind of knew it was his life at stake potentially. So, that's kind of what gets you out the door when at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's like his well-being or my well-being is when it comes down to either one of us, it has to be the choice we make is whatever is recommended. And there
Mhm.
was no doubt to my midwife, like this is what we have to do. So,
Mhm.
and I think just because also how fast my labors were, I knew I
Yeah.
wasn't coming home. In the event that like anything was wrong with him, we wouldn't have the opportunity to get back or to once my labor started. So literally the bulk of my contractions were
In the
on a
car.
car ride, and I'm hanging out the window crying, and people are
Oh.
at stoplights watching me
Yeah.
on my hands and knees. Yeah,
No
doing horse
seatbelts for
breath.
you.
No. Yeah, yeah. So it was a pretty hilarious experience for sure because it was in the middle of the day. Like
Oh, much more traffic. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is the thing I remember not realizing. It's so painful to sit when your baby is engaged and low, right? Like it's like you feel like you're sitting on their head.
there was I couldn't, yeah, I was on my knees right from I just walked
Yeah.
in. There was no way. Yeah. Yeah. My water was breaking and like the
Oh.
contractions coming out, and it was just like, oh my gosh, the fear. I was just like on this fast highway going, drive faster. Like, we're gonna have this baby right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And then also the fear of like, I haven't felt this baby move. Is he okay? Is this baby okay? Like there's a lot that you had to breathe
Yeah.
through, I guess.
When I hemorrhaged with the first one,
Oh,
so
you
this
didn't
was
mention that small
forgot to
detail.
mention that. Yeah, so there was a small hemorrhage. So I'm going, if I have no one here, how do we manage a hemorrhage on our own?
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
but our doula was following us. So thankfully she was, she didn't have Pitocin or anything, but at least that was some sort of, she was trying to keep up to cash driving so fast.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah, it was
goodness.
mentally, there was a lot going on.
Yeah. So you
In
get to the
between.
hospital and your baby's still in, you're in, and how long? Like till he was born?
Well, we got there at about 1 and he was there at 2:32. So
Mm.
he came contractions for every 30 seconds. And at that point, I think my nerves settled. And this is what's so interesting. I feel like the contractions were better once I arrived at the
Yeah.
hospital.
You
And
felt
it's probably 'cause
safer,
I weren't-
right? You
yeah,
probably felt safer.
yeah. No, totally. Yeah. And you're not moving in like trying to balance yourself in the car, but
Yeah.
there's all that weight that you're carrying, mentally when
Yeah.
you, there's so many unknowns. So yeah, it was after that, it was, not a piece of cake, but
Yeah.
things went really well. And yeah,
That's
he came pretty fast. So
He's adorable. He's huge also.
yeah, he's growing like a weed, thank goodness. So
So
that's
what
crazy.
would you like what would you say if you right now, you're 3 weeks postpartum, if you could go back and tell your pregnant self something, your most recent pregnant self something, what would you say to her?
Oh man, I would worry less about, can I do this? I think that was a big thing. And like, yeah, I don't know. That's a that's a hard one because I did arm myself with I think all the right tools, and maybe I should have started that a little bit sooner. So if anything, it's know that you're not alone. And I think for a little bit I was swimming, um, and just panicking about how physically I would do in this.
Mhm.
And postpartum. I know only 3 weeks postpartum, but I think I'm doing better than I was with my first one. And that was a big concern considering that we really wanted her. And I wasn't sure where I was at with him at that point. Um, and then he did get MCAT too. So how well, we managed that news. It was hard, but
Mm.
um, just knowing that you can do it. And I think just remembering to, like I said, dig into those supports,
Mhm.
and at the end of the day it's going to be okay because it was. And like I said, of all the stuff that happened, to add to that, actually my when we got back from the hospital, we came home, and the next day my mom brought our daughter, she's 15 months old, back home. So she was driving my car with her, and they were coming at 6 o'clock around that time, and I was on my front patio. and I heard a huge honk, honk, honk smash, and some
Mm.
guy come out and yell. So turns out my aunt was following them in the car. Both Cash and I knew that our daughter was arriving any minute. And of course, there's this big accident on a highway where people are flying outside our driveway. And my mom's car was totaled with my aunt in it. Everyone was fine, thank goodness. But that was another element of stress in the first 24 hours that he was
Oh
born.
my God.
And my daughter was part of what they can't manage, like throwing up or diarrhea, and then it's a hospital trip with their condition. So they have MCAD deficiency, and so it's she actually got out of the car and had thrown up on the way, and so 3 hours later it was again, and so we actually had to cash just basically he missed the kids meeting each other. Ended up taking Letty to the hospital. She was there. They had admitted her twice that week, and he was gone for the week after that. But it's just there's things that happen, and it's since then I've been doing okay, and I would have gone back and just said I can do this. Like women, we're tough. Like it is crazy what we can handle, and I think if anything, labor really empowers women after you get through it. I've had multiple friends have babies in the last year, and I think all of us feel stronger and more proud of ourselves coming out of it. And
Mhm.
just remembering that at the end of it, you're going to be so strong and so proud because I am after this one, and I feel very empowered after getting through all of it.
Yeah, holy crap, no kidding. I'm only getting emotional picturing you, like, at home with your new baby, and now your daughter has to go to the, like, ER and your husband's gone, like and, like, what? Like, it's just, like, the hits keep coming,
Yeah.
and the fact that you weren't like, "Come on, universe. Come on, God. Like, cut me some slack here."
Oh,
You know?
I was bawling. I'm out in our driveway in my little like nightgown with the buttons so I can breastfeed. And like, you got your big like the big underwear on underneath it.
Mhm,
And I'm
mhm.
like wandering. Cash is like, get back inside. I'm like picking my daughter up covered in throw up out of the car, trying to find pylons. Like it was a mess. But
Oh my gosh.
we got through it. So yeah.
Well, okay, so let me finish up with this other next question. What would you say to anyone listening to this who's pregnant, and what advice would you give them?
Honestly, you were strong and you will get through this. Your body is built for this. And arm yourself with information. Like, Nikki, you're a wealth of information, resources, network. Tap into that. Like, your Instagram is free for people. Yes, you can get it, get the courses and stuff and different, avenues to grow your information more. But there are resources if you can tap into those, do it. And remember that, movement and breath work are your best friend in labor. I
Mhm,
did your horse breath all second labor. I had my doula. She was fantastic, helping me move, reminding me to move. You learn these things. And I made sure, I had a doula the first one too, but she didn't make it because it was so fast until the teaching part. So this time, Cash called her immediately, despite my telling him not to, that I was totally fine, because thank God she got there right as things did
mm,
pick up. Um, but she was there helping me and reminding me to move. So you can get support. Tell your support person, these are the things that are important, and remind me, because if you move and you breathe and you just know your body was meant for this, um, you can get through it. And I did have two friends who delivered in the next 10 days after me, and their pregnancies were quite similar, but their labors were very different. And they had long labors. One ended up in a cesarean, the other one had her kid taken to NICU. Very traumatic on their own, and all of us have kind of teamed together. We've shared our stories, and we all can support each other. So
mhm,
make sure you have that support, and advocate for yourself. Like, I ended up on my back in my first pregnancy, and I had to tell my doula and Cash, my partner, remind me that that wasn't how I wanted to do it, because in that moment sometimes you're not thinking straight.
yeah,
And so remember to advocate for yourself. Like, if they tell you to get on the table, say, I want to be on my knees. And I did that this time,
mhm,
and it went really well. Like, I pushed 4 times and he was out. They were excruciating. He
mhm.
came out with his hand, beside his head too, so
Oh,
he got stuck. But like, there was, it was amazing the difference. I pushed for half an hour last time. It's also a second birth, but you know, very different. So advocate, breath and movement would be kind of my big, big learnings, I guess.
I love it. All of it. All of it. And just your resilience through all of it and your ability to just sort of feel empowered despite having to navigate so much that was just simply not within your control. And learning to kind of just understand the difference between what you can and cannot control and then focus on the things you can control. You're like, I can't control a bunch of other crap, but you're not gonna make me be on my knees, y'all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or not my knees, my back. You know what I meant? But
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
all of that, right? So yeah, whew, shivers, my friend. Thank you, Leah. Thank you so much for sharing. And your little guy, I think you fell asleep in your arms. Almost, almost. Oh, what a
Yeah, yeah.
sweetheart. What a sweetheart. Well, thank you again. He's been an angel, my goodness.
No, he's as long as I'm holding him, he's
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
Don't let me put him down.
Wow.
He's
Oh, what a
beauty.
sweetie. Well, thank you again for sharing your story. And it means a lot that you made the time.
Oh, likewise, I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing what you do because it really is making a difference. So